Evelyn Reed attended her own funeral from a hotel room several miles away, watching through a secret video stream fed to her by her niece. To her three wealthy, estranged children, Charles, Gabrielle, and Michael, their mother was suddenly gone, an unexpected loss that forced them to confront a long-deferred guilt. They had no idea that her death was merely an elaborate charade, a desperate tragedy born from the heartbreaking silence of her 80th birthday. Evelyn, the woman who had sacrificed everything, had now staged her own painful true story to teach her children one final lesson in love and loss. The plan was in motion, the shocking will was sealed, and from the shadows, Evelyn waited to see if her extreme act of love would mend her family or shatter it for good. Before we begin this journey of discovery, please tell us where you are from. The dressing table mirror reflected Evelyn's wrinkled but dignified face as she prepared for her 80th birthday. Her time-worn hands trembled slightly as she placed the last pin in her silver hair. The room, steeped in memories, was surrounded by family photographs that silently narrated a life of love and sacrifice. Evelyn paused for a moment, her eyes scanning the images of her three children: Charles, the successful lawyer; Gabrielle, the ever-busy socialite; and Michael, the ambitious entrepreneur. A mixture of pride and worry crossed her face as she remembered raising them alone after the early passing of her husband, Edward. With a sigh, Evelyn stood up and walked to the kitchen. The aroma of freshly baked cake, her children's favorite, filled the air. On the dining room table, 3 carefully wrapped gifts awaited her grandchildren. The old woman ran her fingers over the shiny paper, imagining the little ones' smiles. The ringing of the telephone broke the silence. Evelyn's heart leaped with excitement. It must be Charles, she thought, or maybe Gabrielle calling from Paris. She nearly stumbled in her haste to answer. "Hello?" she replied, her voice full of anticipation. "Mrs. Reed, I'm calling to confirm your doctor's appointment for next week," said an unfamiliar voice on the other end of the line. Evelyn's smile slowly faded. "Yes, thank you," she responded in a dull voice before hanging up. She returned to her favorite armchair, her gaze fixed on the wall clock. The hands seemed to move with agonizing slowness. As the minutes passed, a shadow of doubt began to cloud her hopeful gaze. Could her children have forgotten her birthday? No, she told herself. Surely they'll arrive at any moment with a surprise. It has to be. The wall clock struck 7 p.m., with a chime that echoed in the empty living room. Evelyn, sitting in her favorite armchair, didn't take her eyes off the front door. The table, meticulously set for a celebration that never came, seemed to mock her loneliness. The untouched cake was beginning to lose its freshness, just like Evelyn's hopes. Her wrinkled hands held a card she had written to herself, "Happy birthday, Mom." The irony of the gesture hit her hard, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. The silence of the house was only broken by the occasional beep of her phone messages from acquaintances and neighbors, but nothing from her children. Evelyn rose with difficulty and approached the window. The streetlights were turning on, one by one. Families were returning to their homes. Distant laughter drifted from the park. The outside world seemed to mock her solitude. She returned to her seat and picked up the photo album she had prepared to share memories. She opened it, turning the pages filled with happy moments. Charles graduating from law school, Gabrielle on her first runway, Michael closing his first big deal. Where were those children who used to run to hug her? The phone rang again. Evelyn lunged for it, her heart beating with renewed hope. "Charles? Gabrielle? Michael?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Good evening, ma'am. We're calling to offer you an incredible deal on cable services," a monotonous voice replied. Evelyn hung up without responding. The weight of reality fell on her like a tombstone. Her children, those for whom she had sacrificed everything, had forgotten her on the most important day of the year. The tears she had held back for hours finally flowed freely. Evelyn sobbed in silence, her frail body shaking with each shuddering breath. The night wore on, and with it, the painful certainty that she would spend her birthday completely alone. The deathly silence that enveloped Evelyn's house was gradually interrupted by a timid knock on the door. The old woman's heart skipped a beat. A mix of hope and fear took hold of her as she slowly made her way to the entrance. Upon opening the door, Evelyn came face to face with Claire, her niece. The young woman held a small box of cupcakes and wore a warm smile that contrasted with the sadness in her aunt's eyes. "Happy birthday, Aunt Evelyn," Claire said softly, stepping into the house. The contrast between Claire's unexpected arrival and the absence of her own children struck Evelyn with force. A mixture of gratitude and pain was reflected on her wrinkled face. As they shared a coffee in the kitchen, Claire listened patiently as her aunt, in a choked voice, told her about the day's disappointment, about how she had waited for hours for her children to arrive. "I don't understand, Claire," Evelyn whispered, her trembling hands holding the coffee cup. "How could they forget?" Claire took her aunt's hand, offering silent comfort. The conversation revealed the young woman's kindness and, unintentionally, the disdain Evelyn's children felt towards her for her humble origins. "Your cousins, they don't understand the value of family, Auntie," Claire said sadly. "They're so busy with their lives that they've forgotten what's most important." Evelyn nodded slowly, a new perspective forming in her mind. She watched Claire, remembering how her children had looked down on her in the past for not having the social status they believed they deserved. As the night went on, Evelyn found herself sharing anecdotes from her youth, laughing for the first time that day. Claire's presence had brought a ray of light to what had been a bleak day. When Claire finally left, Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching her walk away. A new determination shone in her eyes. That day had been a revelation, and as she closed the door, Evelyn knew that things couldn't go on like this. It was time for a change, and she would make sure it happened. As Evelyn sank into her armchair, memories assaulted her like a relentless storm. Images of the past paraded before her eyes, mixing sweetness and bitterness in equal measure. She saw Charles, her firstborn, receiving his law degree. She remembered working overtime for years to pay for that expensive university. The proud smile on Charles's face that day contrasted painfully with his current absence. Then there was Gabrielle, always radiant and ambitious. Evelyn relived the countless sleepless nights, sewing dresses for her daughter's fashion shows. Now Gabrielle was a renowned socialite, but at what cost? The calls had become increasingly scarce, replaced by cold bank transfers. And Michael, the youngest, whose determination had always amazed her. How she had mortgaged the house to give him the seed money for his tech startup. Success came quickly for Michael, but with it, a distance that seemed to grow with every zero added to his bank account. Evelyn's sacrifices seemed endless. Birthdays spent in solitude, canceled vacations, personal dreams abandoned, all for the well-being of her children. The family inheritance, the fruit of generations of hard work, had become the support for her children's luxurious lifestyles. Evelyn got up with difficulty and approached the mantelpiece where she kept the family albums. With trembling hands, she opened one. The photographs told a story of transformation. The innocent, smiling faces of her children in their youth gradually gave way to harder, more calculated expressions. One photo, in particular, caught her attention. It was from the last Christmas they had spent together, 5 years ago. Charles was looking at his watch impatiently. Gabrielle was absorbed in her phone, and Michael seemed more interested in the gifts than in the family's company. It was in that moment that Evelyn felt something inside her break and, at the same time, harden. Her eyes, previously clouded with sadness, now shone with a fierce determination. "This has to change," she murmured to herself, closing the album with a sharp thud. "And I'll be the one to make sure it does." The gloom of the living room enveloped Evelyn and Claire like a cloak of complicity. Determination shone in the old woman's eyes as she detailed her bold plan to her niece. Claire, though visibly hesitant, listened attentively, her loyalty to her aunt overcoming any reservations. "I'm going to fake my death, Claire," Evelyn declared, her voice surprisingly firm. "It's the only way to make them see the truth." Claire held her breath, processing the magnitude of what her aunt was proposing. "But Auntie, don't you think that's too extreme?" Evelyn shook her head, her resolution unwavering. "They have forgotten the value of family, the meaning of unconditional love. They need a lesson they can't ignore." Together, aunt and niece immersed themselves in drafting a new will. Evelyn dictated while Claire took meticulous notes. Each task designed for her children was laden with meaning, each trial carefully thought out to teach a vital lesson. Charles will have to work as a janitor in a nursing home, Evelyn murmured, a sad smile on her lips. Maybe then he'll learn the humility he's forgotten. Gabrielle will live for a month on minimum wage, she continued. It's time for her to see the world beyond her luxury bubble. And Michael. Evelyn paused, her voice breaking slightly. Michael will care for children in an orphanage. He needs to remember the value of selfless affection. As the night progressed, the plan took shape. Claire watched her aunt with a mixture of admiration and concern. Are you sure about this, Auntie? Once we start, there's no going back. Evelyn nodded, her gaze fixed on the future she was forging. It's necessary, my dear. Sometimes, love requires drastic measures. With the first light of dawn, Evelyn signed the new will. Her next call was to Mr. Harrison, the family's trusted lawyer, a man who had watched her children grow up. He initially dismissed the plan as madness, but as Evelyn spoke, her voice thick with a mother's pain and desperate love, he relented. This is highly unorthodox, Evelyn. He had sighed. And highly risky. But I will help you prepare the will. Her final, most difficult call was to Dr. Miller. He protested vehemently, citing his ethical obligations. I am not asking you to lie, David, Evelyn pleaded, using his first name. I am asking you to help me save my family. I will handle the certificate. I just need you to be silent and to be a friend. After a long, heavy silence, the old doctor agreed, his voice filled with a mix of reluctance and profound sympathy. As the sun rose, Evelyn knew the most difficult pieces were in place. The plan was in motion. The news of Evelyn's death spread like wildfire. The impact was felt across 3 different continents, shaking the seemingly perfect lives of her children. In New York, Charles received the call in the middle of an important meeting at his prestigious Wall Street law firm. His normally impassive face turned visibly pale. With trembling hands, he excused himself and left the room, ignoring the curious glances of his colleagues. Are you sure, Claire? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Guilt gnawed at him as he remembered the call he never made on his mother's birthday. Meanwhile, in an exclusive spa in Paris, Gabrielle was submerged in a salt bath when her assistant gave her the news. For a moment, her mask of indifference cracked, revealing genuine pain. She abruptly got out of the tub, splashing water everywhere, her mind a whirlwind of memories and regrets. Cancel my appointments for the week, she ordered, her voice breaking slightly. I have to go home. On the other side of the world, in Tokyo, Michael was closing the deal of a lifetime when he received the message. The champagne he was about to pop was forgotten as he processed the news. His face, usually animated by ambition, darkened with a mixture of shock and regret. I'm sorry. We'll have to postpone the celebration, he murmured to his partners, leaving them perplexed. Despite the initial shock, none of the 3 made immediate plans to return, each trapped in their own web of commitments and obligations. They began to look for excuses to delay their return. Meanwhile, in their hometown, Claire faced the arduous task of coordinating the fake funeral. With a heavy heart, she received condolences from neighbors and friends, feeling increasingly guilty about the deception. In the solitude of her hotel room, Evelyn watched everything through Claire's updates. Each message, each reaction from her children, was like a stab to her heart, but she remained firm, convinced that this pain was necessary to achieve a greater healing. The tension reached its peak when the children began to inquire about the will, revealing their true priorities. Their questions, more focused on the inheritance than on honoring their mother's memory, only confirmed to Evelyn that her drastic plan was sadly necessary. Evelyn's fake funeral became an elaborate theater of genuine emotions and necessary deceptions. Claire, with the weight of the secret on her shoulders, moved among the mourners like a consummate actress, her face a perfect mask of contained grief. Evelyn's house, once silent and forgotten, was now bustling with activity. Neighbors and old friends arrived in waves, their faces marked by an authentic sadness that contrasted painfully with the absence of the supposed deceased's children. Evelyn was the heart of this neighborhood, sobbed Mrs. Martinez, a lifelong neighbor. She always had a kind word for everyone. Claire nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Every compliment, every anecdote shared, was a reminder of the love Evelyn had sown in her community, and of the painful indifference of her own children. The most tense moment came when Dr. Miller, Evelyn's family doctor for decades, showed up to offer his condolences. Claire felt the ground open up beneath her feet. "I'm so sorry, Claire," the doctor said, his eyes full of genuine compassion. "Your aunt was an extraordinary woman. I still can't believe she's gone so suddenly." Claire stammered a reply, her mind racing to maintain the charade. "Thank you, doctor. It was very sudden for all of us." Meanwhile, in a room upstairs, Evelyn watched everything through a small hidden camera. Every tear shed by her neighbors was like a balm to her wounded heart, but it also intensified her determination to see her plan through to the end. As the day wore on, Claire found herself drowning in a sea of guilt and doubt. Was all this pain worth it? Would they really achieve the change Evelyn hoped for in her children? As night fell, when the last of the visitors had left, Claire went up to the room where Evelyn was hiding. She found the old woman sitting by the window, her face streaked with silent tears. "Auntie," Claire whispered, "are you sure you want to continue with this?" Evelyn turned to her niece, her eyes shining with a mixture of pain and resolution. "More than ever, my dear. Today I've seen more love and respect from strangers than I have from my own children in years. It's time they learn the true value of family." At that moment, Claire's phone vibrated. It was a message from the lawyer. The envelope with the will's instructions had been sent to the law firm. The game had officially begun. The day of the will reading dawned gray and oppressive, as if the weather itself foreshadowed the emotional storm that was about to break. The lawyer's office, normally a place of sober formality, vibrated with a barely contained tension. Charles, Gabrielle, and Michael, gathered for the first time in years, sat in uncomfortable silence, avoiding eye contact. Their faces, marked by jet lag and a poorly concealed guilt, betrayed a mixture of pain and anticipation. Claire, sitting in a corner as the executor of the will, observed her cousins with a mix of pity and disapproval. The lawyer, a reluctant accomplice in Evelyn's plan, entered the room with a sealed envelope in his hands, his expression unreadable. "Before I proceed," the lawyer began, "I must state that the contents of this will are unusual." The siblings exchanged confused glances. Charles, always the first to take control, cleared his throat. "What do you mean by unusual?" The lawyer, without answering directly, began to read. As the conditions of the will were revealed, the atmosphere in the room transformed dramatically. "Work as a janitor?" exclaimed Charles, his face flushing with indignation. "This has to be a joke." Gabrielle, upon hearing her own task, let out a hysterical laugh that soon turned into sobs. "A month on minimum wage? But my monthly expenses are 10 times that." Michael, seemingly the most composed, turned visibly pale at the mention of the orphanage. "There must be a mistake," he murmured, more to himself than to the others. The reading continued, detailing how the fulfillment of these tasks was a sine qua non for receiving their share of the inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening. Suddenly, as if a dam had broken, the siblings erupted in a cacophony of protests and accusations. "I'll contest this will," shouted Charles, slamming his fist on the table. "It's clearly the product of a disturbed mind." Gabrielle, between sobs, pleaded with the lawyer. "Please, there has to be another way. I can't live like this. I just can't." Michael, regaining his businessman's composure, tried to negotiate. "Surely we can reach a more reasonable agreement." Claire, observing all this, felt a mixture of sadness and vindication. Her aunt's plan was working. The true natures of her cousins were being laid bare. The unperturbed lawyer closed the envelope. "The conditions are clear and irrevocable. You have 1 month to decide whether to accept them or renounce your inheritance." As the siblings continued to argue, Claire couldn't help but think of Evelyn, alone in her hiding place, and how she would react to knowing that her last act of motherly love had unleashed such chaos. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when the 3 siblings received the news that would change the course of their trials. A message from the lawyer informed them that, by their mother's express wish, all tasks had to be performed in their hometown, Oak Creek. The small town, nestled between mountains and forgotten by time, was a place they had avoided for years. For them, it represented a past they preferred to forget, a constant reminder of their humble origins. Charles was the first to arrive, his luxury car clashing with the cobblestone streets. As he got out, he was met with curious glances and barely disguised whispers. "That's Evelyn's son. Look how he's changed. So many years without visiting." Gabrielle arrived shortly after, struggling with her designer suitcases. The heel of her shoe got stuck between the cobblestones, provoking giggles from the children playing in the square. Her normally imperturbable face flushed with embarrassment. Michael was the last, having delayed his arrival as much as he could. As he entered the town, he felt as if time were rewinding. Every corner, every tree seemed to hold a memory of his childhood. The three met in front of the old family home, now closed and looking abandoned. The contrast between its current state and the warm memories they had of it was painful. "Well, what now?" Gabrielle asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I suppose we should find lodging," Charles replied, his tone revealing how little he liked the idea. The only inn in town, the Oak Creek Inn, had only 2 rooms available. After a heated argument, Charles and Michael agreed to share one, while Gabrielle took the other. That night, as each prepared for sleep, the reality of their situation hit them hard. They were back in the place they had tried so hard to leave behind, facing tasks that challenged everything they thought they knew about themselves. In the darkness of her room, Gabrielle stifled a sob. Charles, listening to Michael's snores, wondered how he had gotten to this point. And Michael, pretending to be asleep, fought against the memories that threatened to overwhelm him. Meanwhile, hidden in a house on the outskirts of town, Evelyn received Claire's daily report. With each detail, her heart was torn between sadness and hope. "May God forgive me," she whispered to herself, "but this is necessary." The town, oblivious to the drama unfolding, prepared for the days to come. The arrival of Evelyn's prodigal children promised to shake up the quiet routine of Oak Creek, unearthing long-buried secrets and testing family ties like never before. The dawn in Oak Creek brought with it a palpable tension. The 3 siblings, still bewildered by the turn of events, headed to their respective tasks with a mixture of resignation and resentment. Charles arrived at Golden Sunset Senior Care, a dilapidated building on the outskirts of town. Upon entering, the smell of medicine and old age hit him with force. A tired-looking nurse handed him a faded uniform and guided him to the hallways he was to clean. As he mopped the floor, cursing under his breath, a frail voice startled him. "Charles, is that you, Evelyn's son?" He turned to find Mrs. Carmichael, an elderly woman with lively eyes who was looking at him with astonishment. "Your mother and I were like sisters," Mrs. Carmichael continued, her eyes filling with tears. "She would be so proud to see you here, helping those in need." The words pierced Charles's heart like needles as he listened to Mrs. Carmichael relate stories about his mother, a young woman full of dreams and determination. He felt something inside him begin to crack. Gabrielle, for her part, was facing her first day at the town's coffee shop. Her hands, accustomed to luxury manicures, were now red and chapped from the hot water and soap. Every wrong order, every broken plate was a blow to her pride. During her break, she found herself talking to Lucy, a single mother who worked 2 shifts to support her children. Lucy's story, full of sacrifices and small joys, made Gabrielle question her own priorities for the first time in years. Michael spent the day at the local orphanage, surrounded by children hungry for attention and affection. A small boy with big brown eyes, Leo, clung to him from the first moment. "Will you stay with us?" he asked with a mixture of hope and fear that shook Michael to his core. As he played with the children, Michael couldn't help but think of his own childhood, of the moments of simple joy he had shared with his siblings and his mother. When had he lost that ability to enjoy the little things? As night fell, the 3 siblings gathered at the inn, exhausted and moved by their experiences. None of them wanted to admit it, but something had changed in them. The stories they had heard, the lives they had touched, were beginning to slowly melt the layer of indifference they had built up over the years. In the privacy of their rooms, each struggled with their own demons. Charles couldn't get Mrs. Carmichael's stories out of his head. Gabrielle looked at her battered hands, thinking of Lucy and her children. Michael, lying in the dark, heard Leo's laughter echoing in his ears. None of them knew it, but this was just the beginning of a journey that would change their lives forever. The morning sun found Claire walking through the cobblestone streets of Oak Creek, her heart torn between loyalty to her aunt and a growing empathy for her cousins. She watched from the shadows, catching fragments of their daily struggles, a silent witness to their slow transformation. At the coffee shop, Claire saw Gabrielle struggling with a stubborn coffee machine, her eyes, once full of disdain, now showing a determination mixed with humility. Claire felt a pang of guilt seeing her cousin bite her lip, holding back tears of frustration. Later, she passed by the nursing home where Charles was cleaning the hallways. She watched him stop to listen to an old man telling him war stories, his normally arrogant face now softened by genuine attention. Claire had to stop herself from revealing her presence, moved by this glimpse of humanity in her cousin. At dusk, she approached the orphanage. Through the window, she saw Michael surrounded by children, reading to them in a voice she had never heard from him, full of tenderness and patience. The lump in her throat tightened as she saw the sincere smile on her cousin's face, so different from his usual smirk of superiority. As she was returning to the house where Evelyn was hiding, Claire was surprised by Charles coming out of a store. In a moment of panic, she hid behind a tree, her heart pounding. "Claire? Is that you?" Charles's voice startled her. She turned slowly, facing her cousin's inquisitive gaze. "Charles, I was just passing through," she stammered, her mind racing to invent a credible excuse. "Passing through Oak Creek?" Charles asked, his tone a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "What are you really doing here, Claire?" At that moment, Claire's phone vibrated. It was a message from Evelyn, asking for the day's news. Claire felt the world closing in on her, trapped between the lie and the truth, between her duty and her emotions. I came to visit Aunt Evelyn's grave," she finally lied, hating herself for every word. Charles looked at her intently, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I see. It's good that someone is," he said, his voice breaking slightly. As she watched Charles walk away, Claire felt the weight of guilt crushing her. Was all this deceit worth it? Were they really doing the right thing? That night, in the solitude of her room, Claire cried silently, torn between her love for Evelyn and the pain she saw in her cousin's eyes. The plan that had once seemed just and necessary now felt like an unbearable burden. The scorching mid-afternoon sun beat down on the New Hope Children's Home as Michael organized an outing to the nearby park. The children, excited by the adventure, swarmed around him like a flock of restless birds. Among them was Leo, the little boy with brown eyes who had earned a special place in Michael's heart. "Ready for our adventure, champ?" Michael asked, ruffling the boy's hair. Leo nodded enthusiastically, his eyes shining with excitement. The afternoon passed with laughter and games, when suddenly Michael noticed that Leo was no longer in the group. A chill ran down his spine as his eyes frantically scanned the park. "Has anyone seen Leo?" he shouted, panic growing in his voice. The other children, sensing his fear, began to call for the little boy. The minutes turned into agonizing hours. Michael, completely forgetting his expensive suit and his businessman image, plunged into the search with a desperation he didn't know he possessed. He ran through narrow streets, crawled through wooded areas, and shouted Leo's name until his voice grew hoarse. The news spread quickly through the town. Charles and Gabrielle, upon hearing, left their tasks and joined the search without hesitation. For the first time in years, the three siblings worked together, united by a common purpose. As the sun began to set, a heartbreaking cry broke the silence. "I found him! Over here!" It was Michael's voice. Leo was trapped in a deep ditch, scared but unharmed. Michael, without a second thought, slid down the slippery slope, ignoring the cuts and scrapes he got in the process. He carefully took the boy in his arms and began the difficult ascent. "I've got you, Leo. You're safe," he whispered, his voice broken with emotion. When they finally emerged, covered in mud and tears, they were greeted by the applause and hugs of the community. Charles and Gabrielle ran towards them, their faces reflecting relief and pride for their brother. That night, as the three siblings shared a silent dinner at the inn, something had changed. The barriers they had built over the years were beginning to crumble. Michael, looking at his still trembling hands, reflected on the fear he had felt, a fear that had nothing to do with money or status. "You did something extraordinary today," Charles said, breaking the silence. "Mom would be proud." Gabrielle nodded, unshed tears shining in her eyes. "We all are." In that moment, the three felt the weight of years of indifference and selfishness. The experience had shaken them to the core, revealing a truth they had long forgotten, the true value of human connection and unconditional love. The aroma of fresh coffee and toast filled the small coffee shop where Gabrielle was busy cleaning tables and serving early morning customers. Her once perfectly manicured hands now showed calluses and small cuts, silent witnesses to her new reality. While cleaning a table in the corner, an old photo album forgotten under a chair caught her attention. Intrigued, she picked it up and began to flip through it. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. There, among the yellowed pages, was the smiling face of her mother, Evelyn, decades younger. Gabrielle sat down, completely forgetting her tasks. Photo after photo, she saw an Evelyn she had never known. A young, vibrant woman surrounded by friends, participating in community projects, with a light in her eyes that Gabrielle didn't remember seeing in her mother for years. "Ah, I see you found the old gang's album," a nearby voice said. Gabrielle looked up to meet Mr. Peterson, a regular at the coffee shop. "You knew my mother?" Gabrielle asked, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Peterson sat down across from her, his eyes twinkling with memories. "Knew her? Your mother was the soul of this town, child. There wasn't a community project Evelyn wasn't involved in. Always thinking of others, always with a smile, even in the toughest times." As Mr. Peterson shared story after story, Gabrielle felt as if she were meeting her mother for the first time. He told her how Evelyn had organized a fundraiser to rebuild the school after a fire, about the nights she spent caring for the sick during a flu epidemic, how she convinced the town council to create a scholarship program for the town's children. "Your mother understood that true success isn't measured in money or fame, but in the lives you touch, in the difference you make," Mr. Peterson concluded. Gabrielle, with tears running down her cheeks, looked at her battered hands and then at the photo of her young, vibrant mother. For the first time, she saw the resemblance between them not just in physical features, but in the capacity for hard work, for something bigger than oneself. "What happened to us?" she murmured to herself. "When did we become so empty?" The rest of the day passed as if in a dream. Every customer, every conversation, every cup of coffee served took on a new meaning. Gabrielle began to see the town and its people through her mother's eyes, discovering a richness that money couldn't buy. That night, as she was closing the coffee shop, Gabrielle made a decision. She took out her phone, which had been ignored for days, and canceled all her social engagements and commitments for the next month. For the first time in years, she felt she was exactly where she needed to be. With the photo album under her arm, Gabrielle walked through the streets of the town, each step taking her not only towards the inn, but towards a rediscovery of herself and her mother's legacy. Dawn found Charles in the hallways of the Golden Sunset Senior Care Nursing Home, his janitor's uniform wrinkled after a sleepless night. Mrs. Carmichael's words about his mother still echoed in his mind, mixing with memories of the search for Leo and the transformation he was seeing in his siblings. While cleaning the floor of the East Wing, a commotion caught his attention. In a room at the end of the hall, an old man was shouting, refusing to take his medication. Charles moved closer, more out of curiosity than duty. "I won't take anything until my lawyer is present," the man bellowed. Charles stopped dead in his tracks. He knew that voice. He entered the room and came face to face with Albert Goodwin, his father's old business partner. The old man, gaunt and with disheveled white hair, was barely a shadow of the powerful businessman Charles remembered. Charles? Edward's son? Albert asked, his voice suddenly soft. Well, how things change. Over the next few hours, as he helped the nurses calm Albert, Charles heard a story that shook the foundations of everything he thought he knew about his family and his fortune. Albert, between coughing fits and moments of lucidity, revealed the truth about the origin of the family's wealth. He spoke of shady deals, of bribes, of lives ruined in the name of progress and profit. Your mother? Albert said, his eyes clouded with remorse. Evelyn was the only one with a conscience among us. She tried to stop us, you know. But Edward and I, we were young, ambitious. We didn't listen. Charles felt the world crumble around him. Every luxury he had enjoyed, every privilege he had taken for granted, was stained with the guilt and suffering of others. Why are you here, Mr. Goodwin? Charles asked, his voice barely a whisper. The old man let out a bitter laugh. Karma, my boy. I lost everything trying to make up for our mistakes. Your mother. She was right. She was always right. When he finally left Albert's room, Charles felt as if he had aged decades in just a few hours. He looked at himself in the hallway mirror, seeing for the first time not the successful lawyer, but the son who had ignored his mother's most important lessons. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed the number of his firm in New York. It's me, he said when his partner answered. I need you to investigate all our cases from the last 5 years. Any irregularities? Anything that doesn't feel right? We're going to fix this, whatever it costs. As he hung up, Charles felt a mixture of terror and relief. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, he felt he was doing the right thing. That night, when he met his siblings for dinner, Charles looked at them with new eyes. He no longer saw competitors or disappointments, but allies in a journey of redemption that was just beginning. The afternoon sun bathed the cobblestone streets of Oak Creek as Gabrielle entered the coffee shop for her evening shift. The exhaustion of the last few days was reflected on her face, but there was a new determination in her eyes, born from the revelations about her mother. As she cleaned the tables, her attention was caught by a conversation in the corner. 2 elderly women, with steaming cups of tea in front of them, were talking in low but animated voices. I'm telling you, Marge, it was her. As sure as my name is Connie, one said, leaning toward her friend. But Connie, how can that be? We all went to the funeral, the other replied skeptically. Gabrielle moved closer, pretending to clean the adjacent table, her heart pounding. I saw her with my own eyes, on the outskirts of town, near the old Morales house. It was Evelyn, I swear, Connie insisted. Gabrielle dropped the cloth she was holding, startling the old women. Excuse me, she murmured, picking up the cloth with trembling hands, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She finished her shift in a daze, the women's words echoing in her ears. Could it be true? Was her mother alive? Without a second thought, Gabrielle headed to the outskirts of town. The path to the Morales house was almost overgrown with vegetation, a sign of years of neglect. As she got closer, her heart beat faster and faster. And then she saw her. Through a window partially covered by vines, she caught a flash of movement. A familiar figure with silver hair and an upright posture passed in front of the window. Gabrielle stifled a cry, her hand covering her mouth. It was impossible, and yet. She took a step toward the house but stopped. If it was true, what did it all mean? Paralyzed between shock and disbelief, Gabrielle stood motionless, watching the house. Thousands of questions flooded her mind. Why would her mother fake her death? Who else was involved? As the sun set, Gabrielle finally walked away from the house, her world completely turned upside down. She couldn't share this with her brothers, not without being sure. She needed proof. She needed answers. That night, in the solitude of her room at the inn, Gabrielle was torn between hope and fear. If her mother was alive, what did that mean for them? For the lessons they were learning? For their own transformation? With determination, she decided that the next day she would investigate further. She wouldn't rest until she discovered the truth, no matter how painful or surprising it might be. Dawn found Evelyn pacing restlessly in the living room of the old Morales house. The news from Claire about Gabrielle's near discovery had left her in a state of agitation. Her plan, so carefully crafted, was now hanging by a thread. "Auntie, we have to reconsider this," Claire insisted, her voice fraught with worry. "Things are getting too complicated. Gabrielle's suspects, and the others are changing, Auntie. They're really changing." Evelyn stopped in front of the window, her gaze lost on the horizon of the town she once knew so well. "Maybe you're right, my dear, but what if it's just a facade? What if they go back to their old ways as soon as they think the inheritance is secure?" The sound of an approaching car interrupted their conversation. It was the lawyer arriving for his weekly report. With him, he brought news that would further shake the foundations of Evelyn's plan. "Michael has started the process of adopting Leo," the lawyer reported, his tone of surprise evident. "And not only that, he's using his contacts to improve the conditions at the orphanage." Evelyn sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the news. "My Michael? The same one who said children were a waste of time and money?" The lawyer nodded, continuing with his revelations. "Charles has requested a full audit of his firm in New York. It seems he's preparing for some kind of confession or large-scale legal rectification." "And Gabrielle?" Evelyn asked, dreading the answer. "She has canceled all her social engagements for the next month. According to my sources, she's organizing some kind of charity fair with the local merchants." Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. Evelyn looked at Claire, seeing in her eyes the same conflict she felt in her heart. Her plan had worked beyond her most optimistic expectations. But at what cost? "Auntie," Claire said softly, "I think it's time to tell them the truth." Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her decision. She had started this plan with the intention of teaching her children a lesson, to show them the value of empathy and hard work. But now she was risking losing them forever. "I need time," Evelyn murmured, "just a little more time to be sure." As the lawyer left, and Claire prepared for another day of surveillance, Evelyn was left alone with her thoughts. She looked at the photos of her children, the ones she had brought with her to her hiding place, and for the first time since this plan began, she allowed herself to cry. The tears that ran down her cheeks were a mixture of pride for the changes she saw in her children and a deep regret for the pain she was causing them. The line between motherly love and manipulation had never been so thin. Evelyn found herself teetering dangerously on it. The midday sun beat down relentlessly on Oak Creek, but the activity in the town did not wane. At the center of this renewed energy were, unknowingly, Evelyn's 3 children, each immersed in projects that would have seemed unthinkable weeks ago. Charles, with his shirt sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled, was sitting in the main square, surrounded by elderly people and young families. He had set up a sort of free legal clinic, offering advice on issues ranging from property disputes to labor rights. "Don't worry, Mrs. Mercedes," he told an elderly woman with tears in her eyes. "We'll make sure you receive the pension you're entitled to. It's your right." A few streets away, in the coffee shop where she volunteered, Gabrielle was leading a meeting with local merchants. The place was buzzing with energy as they discussed plans for a charity fair. "We could use the square for the stalls," Gabrielle suggested, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "And all the proceeds will go directly to renovating the elementary school." Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Michael was on his knees in the yard, helping the children plant a vegetable garden. His hands, previously only familiar with the touch of legal documents and computer keyboards, were now covered in dirt. "That's it, Leo," he encouraged a little boy who was struggling to dig a hole. "The carrot needs room to grow, just like you." As the day progressed, the effects of their actions began to ripple throughout the town. People talked, shared stories, and rediscovered a sense of community that seemed to have been lost over time. In the square, a group of young people approached Charles, inspired by his initiative. "We want to help," a girl said. "How can we contribute?" In the coffee shop, the merchants, moved by Gabrielle's enthusiasm, began to offer more than what was asked of them. "I can donate all the flowers for decoration," the local florist offered. "And my brother can take care of the music," added another. At the orphanage, potential adoptive parents, attracted by rumors of the improvements, began to arrive. Michael greeted them, sharing his own experience and encouraging them to consider adoption. As the sun began to set, the three siblings, unknowingly, had initiated a transformation that went beyond themselves. The town that had once seen them as arrogant outsiders now looked at them with a mixture of awe and gratitude. That night, when they met for dinner at the inn, there was a different gleam in their eyes, a sense of purpose that none of them had ever experienced before. "You know," Michael said, breaking the silence, "I think I finally understand what Mom always tried to teach us." Charles and Gabrielle nodded, their faces reflecting a mixture of nostalgia and newly acquired understanding. "I wish you were here to see it," Gabrielle murmured, not yet daring to share her suspicions about her mother. What none of them knew was that Evelyn, hidden in the shadows outside the inn, had witnessed everything. With tears in her eyes and her heart torn between pride and guilt, she walked away silently, aware that the moment of truth was inevitably approaching. The evening fell over Oak Creek, dyeing the sky in shades of orange and purple. Claire walked along the cobblestone streets, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had spent the morning observing her cousins, amazed by what she saw in them, but the weight of the secret she kept was becoming increasingly unbearable. She stopped in front of the coffee shop, watching Gabrielle through the window. Her cousin, once a symbol of frivolity and superficiality, now moved among the tables with a grace and kindness that Claire had never seen in her. She was so absorbed in her observation that she didn't notice Charles approaching from behind. "Claire," her cousin's voice startled her. "What are you doing here?" Claire turned, coming face to face with Charles's inquisitive gaze. Her mind raced, searching for a credible excuse. I was just passing through," she stammered, repeating the same lie she had used days before. Charles frowned, his lawyer's instinct detecting the falsehood in her words. "Passing through again, Claire? What's going on?" Claire's heart pounded. She could feel her aunt's elaborate plan beginning to crumble. Just then, her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a message from Evelyn. "I need to see you urgently. Things are getting complicated." Claire looked at the message and then at Charles, feeling the world closing in on her. The pressure of the last few weeks, the pain of seeing her cousins suffer, and the guilt for her part in the deception finally overwhelmed her. "Charles the First," she began, her voice breaking. "There's something you need to know." But before she could continue, Gabrielle came out of the coffee shop, surprised to see her brother and cousin together. "What's going on here?" Gabrielle asked, her tone mixing curiosity and suspicion. Claire looked from Charles to Gabrielle, feeling the weight of their stares. In that moment, she made a decision that would change the course of everything. "I need you to come with me," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "There's something you have to see." Without waiting for a response, Claire began to walk towards the outskirts of town, towards the house where Evelyn was hiding. Charles and Gabrielle, confused but intrigued, followed her in silence. As they walked, Claire felt a mixture of relief and terror. She knew she was betraying her aunt's trust, but she also felt it was the right thing to do. The secrets and lies had gone on for too long. As they approached the old Morales house, the sun was setting on the horizon, as if the day itself were holding its breath for the revelation that was to come. Claire stopped in front of the door, turned to look at her cousins, and with a deep sigh said, "There's someone who wants to see you." With a trembling hand, Claire knocked on the door. Knowing that on the other side, Evelyn would be as surprised as she was terrified by what was about to happen. The silence that followed the knock on the door seemed to stretch for an eternity. Charles and Gabrielle exchanged looks of confusion and anticipation as Claire held her breath, her heart pounding against her chest. Finally, the door creaked open. There, framed in the doorway, was Evelyn, her silver hair shining in the twilight, her eyes filled with a mixture of love and fear as they rested on her children. "Mom?" Gabrielle whispered, her voice barely audible. Charles, for his part, took a step back as if he had seen a ghost. The silence that followed the knock on the door seemed to stretch for an eternity. Charles and Gabrielle exchanged looks of confusion as Claire held her breath. Finally, the door creaked open. There, Framed in the doorway was Evelyn, her silver hair shining in the twilight, her eyes filled with a mixture of love, fear, and profound sadness as they rested on her children. "Mom?" Gabrielle whispered, the word catching in her throat. She took a half-step forward, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were seeing. Charles stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. All the bravado, the anger from the will reading drained away, leaving only a raw, childlike vulnerability. "My children," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but clear. The reality of the situation crashed down on them. It wasn't a ghost. It was a deception, a deep, gut-wrenching betrayal. "How?" Charles finally managed to say, his voice thick with a storm of emotions, anger, hurt, confusion. "How could you do this to us?" "Please," Evelyn pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Come inside. Let me explain." "Charles, you have to come to the hospital right now." Michael's voice sounded distressed. "It's Leo. He's had a relapse, and they need a family member's consent for an emergency operation." The scene turned into a whirlwind of emotions and actions. Without a second thought, the four of them, Evelyn, Charles, Gabrielle, and Claire, rushed to the hospital. The reunion, the explanations, everything took a back seat to the imminent crisis. Upon arriving at the hospital, they found a pale and distraught Michael pacing nervously in the waiting room. Seeing his mother, his eyes widened, but before he could say anything, the doctor appeared. "We need a decision now," the doctor said urgently. "The operation is risky, but without it." A shattered Michael looked at his family. "I'm not his legal guardian yet. I can't make this decision." It was then that Evelyn stepped forward. With a voice that left no room for doubt, she declared, "I am his grandmother. I will give consent." The doctor, though visibly confused by the appearance of this woman everyone believed to be dead, had no time for questions. He accepted Evelyn's consent and hurried to the operating room. The next few hours were an emotional roller coaster. The family, reunited under circumstances no one could have imagined, waited for news about Leo. In whispers, Evelyn began to explain her plan, the reasons behind her feigned death, and how she had watched her children's transformation. Charles, Gabrielle, and Michael listened in silence, their emotions oscillating between disbelief, pain, and, surprisingly, understanding. Claire, sitting a little apart, watched as years of misunderstandings and distance began to unravel. When the doctor finally came out of the operating room, everyone held their breath. "The operation was a success," he announced with a tired smile. "The boy is strong. He's recovering." The relief that flooded the room was palpable. Michael collapsed into a chair, tears of gratitude running down his cheeks. Evelyn approached him, wrapping him in a hug she had been waiting weeks to give. As the family came together in a collective embrace, mixing tears of joy for Leo and emotion for their reunion, it was clear that this moment marked not just the end of a deception, but the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. The truth had come to light in the most unexpected way, and now, united by a crisis and by the love they were rediscovering, they would face whatever the future held, together. Dawn found the family gathered in the small hospital cafeteria, untouched cups of coffee in front of them. The silence that enveloped them was charged with contained emotions, unasked questions, and truths about to be revealed. Evelyn, sitting in the center, seemed to have aged years in a single night. Her tired but determined eyes scanned the faces of her children. Charles, with his wrinkled suit and emerging stubble, kept his gaze fixed on the table. Gabrielle, devoid of her usual perfect makeup, nervously fiddled with the rim of her cup. Michael, exhausted after spending the night by Leo's bedside, struggled to stay awake. "My children," Evelyn began, her voice barely a whisper, "I know I owe you an explanation." "An explanation?" Charles interrupted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You made us believe you were dead, Mom. Do you have any idea what we've been through?" Evelyn nodded slowly, accepting the weight of her actions. "I know, and I am deeply sorry. But I need you to understand why I did it." Over the next hour, Evelyn unraveled the complex web of her plan. She told them about years of worry, watching how money and success were pushing them away, not only from her but from the values that had once been the heart of their family. She told them about sleepless nights, wondering where she had gone wrong as a mother. "The day of my birthday," she said, her voice breaking. "When none of you showed up, I knew I had to do something drastic." Gabrielle sobbed softly, the memory of her negligence hitting her with renewed force. Michael, for his part, clenched his fists, fighting his own emotions. "And this circus with the will?" Charles asked, his tone still harsh but with a glimmer of understanding emerging. "It was all an elaborate lesson." Evelyn nodded. "I wanted you to remember who you really were, beyond the money and the status. I wanted you to see the world as I saw it, full of people who need help, of opportunities to do good." As Evelyn continued to reveal how she had watched their struggles and transformations, the atmosphere in the cafeteria began to change. The initial anger gave way to a complex mix of emotions: pain, understanding, and even, surprisingly, gratitude. "Mom," Michael finally said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep and emotion, "what you did was extreme, but I think I understand why you did it." Gabrielle nodded, wiping away tears. "These weeks have been hell, but they've changed me. They've changed all of us, haven't they?" Charles, the last bastion of resistance, finally softened his expression. "I'm still processing all of this. But you're right, Mom. We were lost. Maybe we needed this wake-up call." Evelyn extended her hands across the table, and one by one, her children took them. Claire, watching from a nearby table, felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "What do we do now?" Gabrielle asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Evelyn smiled softly. "Now, my dears, we start over, together." As the sun rose over the hospital, bathing the cafeteria in a golden light, the Reed family found themselves on the threshold of a new chapter. The path to reconciliation and redemption was just beginning, but for the first time in years, they would face it united. The evening fell over Oak Creek as the family decided to move to the old family home. The place, a silent witness to so many memories, seemed the perfect setting for the confrontation that was about to unfold. Evelyn sat in her old armchair, her children forming a semicircle in front of her. The tension in the air was palpable, like a rope about to snap. Charles was the first to break the silence. "All my life," he began, his voice trembling with contained emotion, "I've chased success, believing that would make you proud. But now I realize I was just running from who I really am." His words opened the floodgates. Gabrielle, with tears streaming down her cheeks, confessed, "I became someone I don't even recognize. I was living for appearances, Mom. I had everything and, at the same time, nothing." Michael, his voice cracking, added, "I built empires but forgot to build relationships. Leo, that boy. He taught me more in a few weeks than all my years at the top." Evelyn listened, her heart torn between the pain of seeing her children suffering and the hope of their awakening. "My children," she said softly, "I never wanted to cause you so much pain. I just wanted you to see." "See what, Mom?" Charles interrupted, a flash of his old anger resurfacing. "That we were failures as human beings?" "No," Evelyn exclaimed, standing up. "I wanted you to see your potential, the goodness that has always been inside you. Yes, you got lost along the way, but you never stopped being my wonderful children." The room fell silent for a moment, each one processing Evelyn's words. Gabrielle, wiping her tears, asked, "How can we fix this, Mom? How can we be the family we should have been?" Evelyn approached her children, taking Gabrielle's hands in hers. "We start here and now, by being honest, by forgiving each other." Charles, still struggling with his emotions, confessed, "I've been investigating our past, Mom, Dad's business dealings. There's so much to fix." Evelyn nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. "I know, son. And I'm proud that you want to make things right." Michael, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "I want to adopt Leo officially. And not just that. I want to use my resources to help more children like him." The atmosphere in the room began to change. The initial anger and resentment gave way to a sense of shared purpose, of redemption. "It won't be easy," Evelyn warned. We'll have to work hard to rebuild our relationship, to right the wrongs of the past. We'll do it together, Gabrielle said with determination. As a family. As night fell on the old house, the family found themselves united in an embrace, tears mixing with nervous laughter. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and awkward moments, but for the first time in years, they would face those challenges together. Evelyn, at the center of the hug, closed her eyes. Her plan, born of desperation and love, had worked in ways she never imagined. Now, all that was left was to hope that the newly forged bond would be strong enough to withstand the trials that were still to come. Dawn found the family gathered in the kitchen of the old family home. The aroma of fresh coffee and toast filled the air, bringing with it memories of simpler times. Evelyn, with renewed energy, moved between the stove and the table, serving her children as she did when they were little. Charles, with dark circles under his eyes, played with his coffee cup. I could barely sleep last night, he confessed. I kept thinking about everything we have to fix. Gabrielle nodded, her normally perfect hair now pulled back in a messy ponytail. Me neither. But I also thought about all the possibilities we have ahead of us. Michael, who had spent the night at the hospital with Leo, entered the kitchen with news. The doctor says Leo can be released in a few days. I'm thinking of staying in Oak Creek for a while. Evelyn put down the coffee pot and sat with her children, her face a mixture of exhaustion and hope. My children, she began. I know you have many questions, many feelings to process. I'm here to listen. What followed was a deep and emotional conversation. He spoke of his internal struggle between his career and his conscience, of how the last few weeks had opened his eyes to a different way of practicing law. Gabrielle, with tears in her eyes, shared how she had rediscovered the joy of genuine connections, how the people of the town had accepted her not for her last name or her money, but for who she really was. Michael, the most transformed of the three, spoke of Leo and the other children at the orphanage, of how they had filled a void in his life that he didn't even know existed. Evelyn listened, her heart swelling with pride and love. My dears, she finally said, what you have achieved in these weeks is more than I ever dared to hope for. But Mom, Charles interrupted, how can we be sure this will last? What if we go back to our lives and forget all this? Evelyn took her eldest son's hand. That's the beauty and the challenge of life, Charles. Every day is a choice. And now, you have your eyes open to make that choice consciously. Gabrielle, wiping a tear, added, I don't want to go back to being who I was before. I want to stay here, help with the charity fair, make a real difference. Michael nodded in agreement. I don't want to leave either. Not just for Leo, but for all the kids who need help. I can run my businesses from here, use my resources for something that really matters. As the morning progressed, the conversation became lighter. They shared anecdotes from the past few weeks, laughed about past misunderstandings, and began to weave plans for the future. Evelyn watched her children with a full heart. The road to reconciliation and forgiveness was just beginning, but the seed of change had taken deep root. As the sun rose high over Oak Creek, illuminating the kitchen with a golden light, the family found themselves united not just by blood, but by a shared purpose and a renewed love. The future, though uncertain, looked brighter than ever. The following days in Oak Creek were a whirlwind of activity and emotions for the family. The news that Evelyn was alive had spread through the town like wildfire, generating a mixture of astonishment, confusion, and surprisingly, joy among the inhabitants. Charles, determined to use his legal skills for the common good, set up an impromptu office in the town library. One morning, while reviewing cases of residents who needed legal help, he came face to face with Mr. Goodwin, his father's old partner. I've come to confess, the old man said, his voice trembling. I want to make things right before it's too late. For hours, Charles listened in horror to the details of his father's shady business dealings, feeling the weight of a tainted inheritance on his shoulders. But instead of sinking into despair, he felt a renewed determination. We're going to fix this, Mr. Goodwin, Charles said firmly. It won't be easy, but it's the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Gabrielle immersed herself in the preparations for the charity fair. The town square was buzzing with activity as she coordinated with merchants and volunteers. One afternoon, while hanging posters, she ran into Lucy, the single mother she had met at the coffee shop. "Gabrielle, I can't believe everything you're doing," Lucy said emotionally. "You've changed the lives of so many people here." Gabrielle, moved, hugged Lucy. "You all have changed mine," she replied, realizing how much she had grown in such a short time. Michael divided his time between the hospital, where Leo was recovering quickly, and the orphanage. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of new playground equipment in the yard, he received a call from one of his former partners. "Michael, have you lost your mind?" The partner shouted, "You're throwing away years of hard work for a handful of orphans." Michael, looking at the happily playing children, responded with a calm that surprised even himself. "No, my friend, for the first time in my life, I'm seeing things clearly." Evelyn, for her part, reintegrated into the community, rekindling old friendships and rebuilding bridges she thought were burned. Every day, she watched with pride as her children grew, not just as individuals, but as a family. One evening, as the family had dinner together on the porch of the old house, Evelyn proposed a toast. "To the mistakes that brought us here, and to the love that will keep us together." As they clinked their glasses, each member of the family felt that something had fundamentally changed in them. The conflicts of the past hadn't magically disappeared, but now they had the tools and the will to face them together. The sun was setting over Oak Creek, bathing the town in a golden glow. The family, once fractured by ambition and selfishness, was now stronger, united by a common purpose and a rediscovered love. The day of the big charity fair dawned with a clear sky and a cool breeze that seemed to portend good things. The main square of Oak Creek was bustling with activity from early on, with colorful stalls, cheerful music, and the aroma of homemade food floating in the air. Gabrielle, dressed in a simple floral dress, a far cry from her usual designer outfits, ran from one place to another, making sure everything was in order. Her radiant face reflected a happiness she hadn't experienced in years. "Gabrielle," Lucy called, approaching with a tray of cakes. "The school children decorated these for the sale. Where should we put them?" Gabrielle smiled, moved by the community's effort. "Right here at the central stall. They'll be the star of the fair." Meanwhile, Charles was in a corner of the square where he had set up a free legal advice booth. A line of people waited patiently, each with their own story and need. "Next," Charles called, adjusting his glasses. An old woman approached, her wrinkled hands holding a sheaf of papers. "Young man," she began, "they've been trying to take my house. I don't know what to do." Charles listened attentively, taking notes and feeling a satisfaction that no corporate case had ever given him. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll solve this together." In the center of the square, Michael was supervising a play area for children. Leo, already recovered and full of energy, ran among the other kids, his contagious laughter filling the air. "Dad, look!" Leo shouted, waving a drawing he had just made. Michael froze for a moment, overwhelmed with emotion. It was the first time Leo had called him that. "It's beautiful, champ," he replied, hugging the boy tightly. Evelyn watched everything from a nearby bench, her heart overflowing with pride and love. Claire sat down beside her, handing her a glass of lemonade. "Auntie," Claire said softly, "did you ever imagine your plan would turn out like this?" Evelyn shook her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Never in my wildest dreams, my dear. But this is more than I ever dared to hope for." As the day went on, the fair was filled with laughter, music, and the spirit of community that Oak Creek had rediscovered. The siblings, once distant and selfish, now worked in harmony, each contributing their unique talents for the benefit of all. As night fell, with the stars shining over the town, the family gathered in the center of the square. Charles announced that they had raised double what was expected for the school renovation. Gabrielle shared plans for future community initiatives. Michael, with Leo in his arms, spoke about expanding the support program for the orphanage. Evelyn, surrounded by her children and the affection of the town that once saw them grow up, felt her heart could burst with happiness. The plan, born of desperation and love, had blossomed into something beautiful and transformative. As fireworks lit up the sky, marking the end of the fair and the beginning of a new chapter, the family embraced, united not only by blood, but by a shared purpose and a rediscovered love. The day of the big charity fair dawned with a clear sky. The main square of Oak Creek buzzed with a rediscovered community spirit. Gabrielle, radiant in a simple dress, coordinated the event with a natural grace. Charles, at a free legal aid booth, offered counsel to his neighbors, a sense of purpose on his face that no corporate merger had ever given him. Michael stood in the children's play area, his arm around Leo, who now proudly called him Dad. Evelyn watched it all from a nearby bench, her heart overflowing. Claire sat beside her, handing her a glass of lemonade. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this, Auntie?" Claire asked softly. Evelyn shook her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Never in my wildest dreams, my dear." As night fell, the family gathered in the center of the square. Charles announced they had raised double the funds needed for the school renovation. Gabrielle shared plans for future community projects, and Michael spoke of expanding the support program for the orphanage. Surrounded by her children and the warmth of the town, Evelyn felt her heart could burst with happiness. The plan, born of a mother's desperate love, had blossomed into something beautiful and transformative. As fireworks lit up the sky, marking not an end, but a new beginning, the family embraced, united by a future they would now build together. As night fell over Oak Creek, the family and their friends remained in the garden, united not just by ties of blood or friendship, but by a deep understanding of the lessons learned and the journey traveled. The future, though uncertain, was full of possibilities, illuminated by rediscovered love and a shared purpose. And so, under a starry sky and a garden full of laughter and love, the family story did not come to an end, but rather began a new chapter written with the indelible inks of compassion, forgiveness, and the true wealth of the human spirit. Years passed, not erasing the scars, but transforming them into markers of resilience. Evelyn, now surrounded by the genuine warmth of her children and the vibrant laughter of her grandchildren, including Leo, found a peace she once thought was lost forever. The sprawling garden, once a lonely sanctuary, now hosted family gatherings where stories were shared and new memories were forged. The echoes of a mother's desperate, feigned death had faded, replaced by the living symphony of a family reborn. Charles's pro bono work became a local legend. Gabrielle's community projects revitalized the town, and Michael's foundation changed countless young lives. Their journey was a testament to the idea that it's never too late to rewrite one's story. Evelyn would often look at them, her heart full, thinking how this improbable, beautiful outcome was their shared true story. The pain of the past had not been erased, but it had been redeemed, serving as the foundation for a love that was now, finally, unconditional and unbreakable. If this story of transformation resonated with you, consider subscribing to our channel for more tales that explore the depths of the human heart and the power of redemption.